She thought her aunt had saved her life, but the hidden ledgers revealed a betrayal so deep, it turned blood into the deadliest weapon of all. Your Honor, I present Exhibit A, my itemized invoice for raising my niece after her mother's death. Aunt Lorraine Pierce slid the manila folder across the courtroom with the practiced flourish of someone who had never lost at Thanksgiving, who had always been the one with the louder story and the cleanest conscience. The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the stark columns, dates, receipts, a bold total that gleamed like an accusation, $30,000, each line a demand for repayment of a childhood. The judge looked up with an expression I had not seen in 3 years of law school. Miss Pierce, he said slowly, before we proceed, can you explain why this invoice makes no mention of the steady financial support you were already receiving for Isabella's care? The courtroom erupted. Lorraine's legal team scrambled. Her face, which had held a kind of lacquered certainty since she arrived at my parents' funeral and declared she would do the right thing, drained as if someone had shut off a light behind her eyes. Behind me, cousins who had come to cheer on a mother's righteous cause, children I had once pushed on swings and cut birthday cakes with, whispered and angled toward each other like gulls fighting over the scent of food. I sat perfectly still. In the months before this day, I had hidden an explosive in the neat stacks of discovery, a ledger of deposits and withdrawals, affidavits, photos, a diary discovered under a loose floorboard. I let the trap do its work. That's different, Lorraine stammered, the righteous indignation dissolving into something skeletal. That money was for her care, which you are now billing her for. Judge Malcolm Stone raised an eyebrow. So you received dedicated funds for her support, and now you want a girl to pay you again for the same expenses? My attorney, Ava Reed, gave me the prearranged signal by touching the edge of her folder. The cue was as old as my resolve. She rose with the calm of someone who had read every line of the evidence twice and still slept at night. Your Honor, we'd like to present our counter-evidence regarding how those funds were actually used. Lorraine's face flushed. This is ridiculous. I raised that ungrateful girl for 8 years. 8 years of sacrifice. Sacrifice was a word that tasted like a coin I'd never been given change for. It was the same word Lorraine had used the night she locked me in my room for asking about my mother. The same word she spat when I begged for family photos. It was the word bolted onto every guilt trip, every carefully timed slight, every reminder that I was a burden she had agreed, reluctantly, to carry. Let's proceed in an orderly fashion, Judge Stone said. Ms. Pierce, please explain your invoice. She straightened the discounted designer jacket she liked to wear to court, the one she'd splurged on using funds supposedly set aside for my college. After my sister died, I took in Isabella out of the goodness of my heart. No one else would. Her father was gone, and I had 3 children of my own. Every penny on that invoice represents the sacrifice my family made. Let's go through the line items, the judge said, his tone sharpening. Food, $8,000. Were you not already receiving regular funds intended for Isabella's needs? Judge Stone pressed. Lorraine's lawyer murmured into her ear, but she pushed him off. Yes, but household assistance for a family of 5 barely covered. For the basics, the judge interjected. Which is why you also received additional monthly support. According to these records, it was more than sufficient for basic needs. You don't understand how much teenagers cost, Lorraine cried. Clothes, school supplies, activities. What activities? I asked, my voice cutting across the courtroom like a blade. Ava glanced at me, the corner of her mouth steadying into determination. The judge nodded. The plaintiff may be heard. I had spent 18 years swallowing my life into silence. That dam broke now. You tell us Isabella did activities, I said. I spoke with the cold clarity that law school had taught me to borrow. Which ones? She never attended school trips. She was barred from choir because she couldn't afford the uniform you said you forgot to buy. You said she wore Megan's, Maya's, hand-me-downs, even though the support funds included clothing allowances. Lorraine's voice rose. Anger tried to fill the cracked veneer. You ungrateful. Miss Cruz, Judge Stone said, not unkindly. Do you have evidence? Ava slid a thick folder across the bench to him. Photos. School records listing missed payments. Teacher statements verifying they had come forward to pay for lunch or to cover overdue permission slips. Medical notes referencing a child who was underweight for her age. And then there was the small leather journal, the thing that had lived beneath the floorboard for a decade. My private ledger of humiliation and salvage. I remembered hiding those pages, coded entries stitched with the kind of careless vigilance a child makes of grief. The diary, my diary, listed every party I was not invited to, every year I was given a cheaper present, every time I was told I should be grateful that I had a roof. Each line was an accusation against Lorraine's performance of charity. This is character assassination, Lorraine shrieked. Judge Stone read the diary aloud in measured tones. With each page, his face tightened. Miss Pierce, he said, handing over bank statements, these records show sizable cash withdrawals that line up with the benefit deposits. Care to explain? Lorraine's explanation fell into the courtroom like loose change. I had household expenses. Trips to Las Vegas. A credit card statement floated into solemn air, Atlantic City. Casino charges. The room suddenly feels very small. Lorraine's children sat in stunned silence. Maya, who had always been proud of the new dresses and the shiny gadgets she received on birthdays. Jonah, who had once asked why I did not eat with them. Sophie, who had tried to command playdates and then been shooed away when she reached for toys I had. They had watched their mother perform generosity while their cousin went hungry in the kitchen. Your Honor, Ava said, we'd like to submit evidence of educational fraud. Objection, Lorraine's attorney snarled. That's prejudicial. Overruled, Judge Stone said. Ava produced another folder. Affidavits filed for college grants and state assistance claimed there were funds saved for Isabella's education. Yet, when the day came for me to leave for university, there was no fund waiting. A supposed nest egg of $50,000, calculated according to the benefits specifically earmarked for education, had evaporated. Lorraine muttered about unexpected expenses. Like your bathroom renovation? I asked. The one you posted across social media. Or Maya's Sweet 16 party that cost $15,000. How dare you? Lorraine snapped. Miss Cruz, Judge Stone said gently. I understand this is difficult. I inhaled until the air steadied. She isn't asking for money, I said, addressing the room and not the woman who had once been my guardian. She's asking me to pay for the childhood she stole. To finance my own neglect, wrapped in an invoice. She wants me to thank her for tattooing fate onto my future. Lorraine slammed her palm onto the counsel table. I deserve compensation for taking in my sister's mistake. The single word, mistake, was a noose in the midst of a courtroom. Judge Stone's voice was cold when he spoke. You considered the child a mistake, he said. Is that correct? Lorraine's lawyer whispered furiously, but the damage was done. She had, in front of the court, reduced a grieving infant into a ledger item. Ms. Cruz, anything else? The judge asked. I looked at Lorraine, really looked at her for the first time in years. She had been someone formidable, a person who knew how to control an audience. Now she looked smaller, an actress stripped of her costume. One thing. My throat tightened. Do you remember what you told me the day I was awarded a scholarship to college? Lorraine did not answer. You told me to give it up. That people like us don't go to university. That I should get a job and start paying you back for all you had done. I smiled then, not sweet but knowing. That's when I knew I had to leave. Had to become someone you couldn't pull down. Did you? Judge Stone asked. I did, I said. I graduated from summa cum laude on a full scholarship. I got into law school, passed the bar on my first attempt, and I adjusted my shoulders. I became a victims' rights attorney. I help children who are being exploited by guardians. It turns out there are a lot of Aunt Lorraines in the world. Judge Stone set his hands flat on the bench. I've heard enough. Ms. Pierce, your claim is dismissed. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Department of Social Services for investigation of benefits fraud. You received a total of $280,000 in support intended for Isabella's care. The The evidence indicates that those funds were diverted and that the child was systematically deprived of necessities while you enriched yourself. Criminal investigation is recommended for fraud, neglect, and breach of fiduciary duty. Lorraine's attorney started toward the door. Her children left in a flurry of embarrassed, uncertain movement. Maya paused at the threshold as if she wanted to say something, and then went when her mother grabbed her arm. Only Sophie lingered. She was 21 now, a pale echo of the toddler who had once tried to share her stuffed rabbit with me. "Isabella," she whispered, voice cracking. "I didn't know."
"I'm so sorry."
"I was a child." "You were," I said. "It wasn't your fault." Ava gathered our papers. We had won the battle, but the victory tasted ash and photographs and the slow unspooling of trust. Outside, Lorraine was shrieking about appeals, about her reputation, about children who lacked appreciation for sacrifice. She had always been louder than nuance. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An unknown number. "This is Maya," it read.
"Can we talk?"
"There are things you should know about where the money went. Things Mom doesn't know." I showed Ava. She raised a thin brow. "Could be interesting. Or painful." "Most truth is both," I said. That night we met in a downtown cafe under a street lamp that fondly remembered the city's storms. Maya, Jonah, and Sophie sat across from me, faces pinched with the guilty geometry of children caught with cookies. They had found papers, bank statements, cash withdrawals, loans taken out under my social security number, a trail that led to casinos, to cosmetic renovations, to big checks for big parties. "We confronted her," Jonah said. "She said it was for the family. We knew it wasn't right." "It's not a matter of money anymore," Sophie said quietly. "It's about what she told us to feel. We benefited from your suffering, and we didn't know." "So what now?" I asked. Maya pulled out a small checkbook and pushed it toward me. "We can't return your childhood. We can start by helping fix what she broke." "I don't want their money," I said. "It's not ours," Jonah said. "We want you to have what's right. We'll testify. We'll turn over everything we found. We'll be honest with the investigators." Sophie reached across the table and took my hand. "Because you're family," she said. "And because we remember the little girl who shared her single present when we had dozens." And for the first time in my life, the word cousin didn't sting. It offered something like a possibility. The criminal inquiry would be long. Lorraine would likely face charges for benefits fraud and identity theft. But sitting there with the three of them, I felt something I had been denied in my childhood, an ally who chose truth over comfort. The ledger would be reconciled in courtrooms and in ledgers, but the real accounting was in the 10-year-old diaries and the dinners eaten alone. You can't quite put a dollar price on a childhood. Lorraine had tried. She had presented $30,000 for an 8-year ledger of sacrifices. The judge had countered with a cold arithmetic of a lifetime of stolen benefits. But the deeper cost was written in missing field trips, in a college fund that evaporated, in the spaces where love should have been. When we stepped into the night, Sophie slipped her arm through mine. "Tell us about your work," she urged. "How can we help?" And I told them, as if the telling could stitch the torn edges of my past into something practical. I spoke of pro bono clinics, of the statutes that protected minors, and of how to compile evidence. I explained how restitution was sought, how courts sometimes did what families wouldn't: force accountability. There were months ahead of investigation and testimony. There would be hearings and long interviews, tears coaxed into paper, denials that smelled of perfume, and poor choices. But I slept that night on an unfamiliar pillow and dreamed of ledgers balanced not by money, but by truth. The investigation into Lorraine Pierce began with quiet subpoenas and long, paper-heavy afternoons. The state wanted everything: bank ledgers, property records, sworn statements. Every lie that had been draped over my childhood was peeled back in fluorescent offices where investigators read with tight lips and scribbled notes with pens that rarely paused. I had expected fury. What came instead was exhaustion. To recount, line by line, the ways my life had been carved up and sold for someone else's comfort was like stitching myself back together with a needle made of glass. But Ava was steady at my side, guiding, translating grief into statutes, betrayal into case law. Lorraine's public face began to crack. The local paper ran the headline, "Respected woman accused of benefits fraud." Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, hungry for the fall of a woman who had once chaired PTA meetings and led church bake sales with the fervor of a general. She screamed at cameras, blaming me, the ungrateful niece, for daring to turn family into a spectacle. I let her rage alone. Silence, I had learned, could be a sharper weapon. One evening, Maya arrived at my apartment with a box heavy enough to bend her wrists. "She doesn't know I took it," she whispered. Inside were documents Lorraine had hidden in a cedar chest, loan applications, false tax filings, and at the bottom, a set of letters addressed to a man I had not seen in 18 years. My father. The letters were unopened, and every one returned with addressee unknown scrawled across the envelopes. Lorraine had intercepted them, never telling me he had tried to write. I sat on the floor, letters trembling in my lap, the room spinning with what-ifs. My father had not abandoned me outright. He had been erased from my life by the woman who claimed sacrifice as her creed. The next day, Ava filed to include the letters as evidence of intentional alienation. The court accepted. Lorraine's attorney nearly fainted. The fraud case proceeded with brutal precision. Prosecutors outlined the diversion of $280,000, the casino withdrawals, the home renovations, and the loans in my name. They called teachers, neighbors, and even my childhood doctor. Each testified to neglect disguised as guardianship. When I took the stand, I spoke not as Isabella the child, but as Isabella Cruz, attorney. I explained how guardianship carried fiduciary obligations, how the law recognized neglect not only in bruises, but in malnourishment, withheld education, and stolen futures. My voice shook at times, but I did not falter. Lorraine testified, too, her fury barely leashed. "I gave her everything," she snapped. "Food, shelter, a family. And this is how she repays me." "You gave me scraps," I replied softly. The jury heard it. They always do. It took less than 4 hours. Guilty on counts of fraud, identity theft, and neglect. Lorraine Pierce was sentenced to 7 years in state prison. She collapsed as the gavel fell, not from remorse, but from disbelief that her performance had finally ended without applause. Her children sat together in the gallery, hands linked. Sophie wept. Jonas stared at the floor. Maya, steady as steel, met my eyes across the room and nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. In the months that followed, I helped prosecutors pursue restitution. Some funds were recovered from seized assets, her renovated bathroom, her luxury car, her half-paid gambling debts. It would never equal the childhood she had taken, but it marked the state's recognition that her debts were real. The greater restoration came quietly. Maya invited me to Sunday dinners, where Jonah brought his children, and Sophie cooked too much pasta. At first, I sat stiffly, waiting for the hidden barbs, the familiar performance. But none came. Slowly, cousins became something closer to siblings. Slowly, the word family lost its sting. I also opened a new case at the firm, a pro bono division for victims of familial exploitation. Children like I had been, whose guardians filed invoices for love while siphoning their futures away. Each client was another ledger to balance, another lie to dismantle. Months later, I received a letter at my office, forwarded through the Department of Corrections. Lorraine's handwriting, jagged and unpracticed. I nearly threw it away, but curiosity won. "Isabella," it began. "You destroyed me. I hope you're proud. They treat me like a criminal here. I sacrifice for you, and this is my thanks. Someday you'll understand what family means." I folded it once, twice, then slid it into the shredder. I had already learned what family meant. It was Sophie's quiet apology, Jonah's steady resolve, Maya's steel courage. It was dinners where everyone ate the same meal. It was cousins choosing truth over comfort. Family was not Lorraine's performance. It was what came after. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I visited the grave with Ava beside me. I placed the diary, the coded ledger of my childhood, into the earth beside her stone. It's settled now, I whispered. The bill came due. As the wind stirred the grass, I felt the weight shift. The story was no longer about what had been stolen, but about what I was building. Justice from ashes, family from fractures, love from the spaces where none had been given. And for the first time in decades, I walked away without looking over my shoulder.